Well, when your child is born, is that child enough? And there are two answers. Of course, it's my child. They're enough. They're perfect as they are. They're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. In fact, they are the definition of value and enough. Right? It like hits you on the deepest level. And then there's another instinct you have. This child is not enough. The world is big and I have to prepare them for the world. They are not ready. It's time to train my child because they are not enough to survive this world. And at least one thing as a parent that I realized is that loving your child is holding both of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Wrong Conversation. If there was a conversation that we would call the big one, this is it. On this episode, we're going to get into the deep and heavy but universal feeling of I am not enough. But before we do that, I just need to explain something. For the first 3 minutes of this conversation, and only for the first 3 minutes, what you're going to be seeing is a lower resolution version. We had a technical issue with our camera, so what you're going to be seeing is the Skype call that Adrian and I use to hear each other, because of course we film these from about 3,000 miles apart. So forgive us for that. Also, while I'm here, I just want to remind you that if you've been enjoying these videos, please don't forget to leave us a like on the video, leave us a comment. We've really been loving the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to, stay informed. And remember that if you can't sit through a whole YouTube video to watch these conversations, remember that we're also a podcast and you can take us with you wherever you go. Okay? So with all that out of the way, let's get into the conversation.
I am not enough is a thought and a feeling that can keep you awake at night. It can work its way into your relationships, into your career. It can permeate your life. Joining me is my constant companion in these talks, David Peters, who is a fellow personal coach. And I'm curious, David, how often does this come up for you when you're working with somebody, when you're talking as a personal coach? Or
the easiest way to describe it would be to ask the opposite question, which is, when has it not come up?
I figured you would say that.
It's not always like the deepest of deep, I am not enough, but there's some level of it, right? Because that can be a multi-layered statement. I am not enough.
Yeah, I don't think people always word it that way, of course.
Yeah.
Right? That's part of what you're trying to say, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they might have a goal and they're not sure if they're up to the task.
Yeah. That's one
is
way.
this good enough? Can I pull this off?
Yeah.
But then it also goes to the deepest places, Am I enough? Do I deserve to be? Right? It gets there, and everywhere in between. Everywhere in between.
I think another simple way to say that is insecurity. In a very canned way. That's what we're talking about. That's an overused word, I suppose. But in that, that's actually the root of what we're talking about is this deep. Well, it doesn't always have to be deep. Sometimes it can be just, do I have enough confidence to use the circular saw to cut this board, right? Some people might not, what I mean? Of course, I'm going to do construction metaphors all the time. I think we might find one today too. But because that's not that deep, but then it can be, am I enough for my marriage? Or
am I enough for this podcast?
Am I enough for this podcast?
In fact, we should just stop this podcast so we can you can coach me through my insecurities about appearing here with you to tackle a subject as large as I am not enough.
David, though, the lying in bed statement I just made is something that I experienced, which is why I thought I would go there. So I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking about that we got to do this, and a sense of insecurity, a sense of am I enough crept in. And I knew that if I sat there in that at all, it would keep me awake. It has that sort of energy to it, if that makes any sense.
I always like to think of these difficult feelings or these kind of these tough thoughts. I am not enough, and I always try
Yeah.
to. I always, like we talk about, people. You can assume that people are at least believing they're acting from the best of intentions,
Right.
right? They can make a case for that there's a good intention behind what they do,
Right.
But I also try to give all of these hard feelings good intentions as well,
Yeah.
right? So I am not enough. It might be trying to tell you that there's a challenge ahead, and you might want to prepare. Right?
Right, right.
You're always here to grow and evolve, and so if you're doing that, you're always up against the edge of what you are enough to
Right.
do. And so the question always has to come back at you: are you enough for the next step? If you're stepping forward, some level of that question is going to exist,
Right.
and
It
maybe
just-
keeps you awake. Yeah, keeps you awake and aware of where you're going and what your limits
It
are.
could. This is probably what I'm realizing is this is the healthy side of I am not enough. Because then there's the other side, which leads to non-motivation, right? That leads to complete shutdown in some way. It leads to a depletion of energy, because it reminds me of like they talk about, there's two different kinds of stress, right? Not all stress is bad. Some stress is good. A certain level of, you know what I mean? Like that it gets you, it sharpens you up, it gets you alert, right? But if that stress is overwhelming, if that sense of I am not enough is overwhelming, then you might be seeking out a coach or a counselor or something for a whole other reason. You know what I mean? Because your life you might be feeling the weight. Because let's say it really clearly, right, David? It can be a really heavy feeling.
It can keep you hiding.
Yeah. It's a weight. I've carried it. I don't know if you, I think we both have. I can't imagine. I think every human being that's really in touch with their inner world at all too, it knows that space lives within you. That's always kind of there somewhere, right? I mean, unless you've only experienced successes in your life, which is a rare, it's an elite person right there.
The tough part of I am not enough is when it, like you said, it can turn into a fear, which keeps you stuck, right? And that fear can overwhelm you until you believe that you can't do what needs to be done,
Right.
or that you can't be enough, and then so you don't. Like I lose. I'm going to lose. I'm a victim.
Right.
And that just drains everything out of you, that fear. And then if you don't move, or if you find yourself stuck in that space, it also comes with guilt.
Oh yeah.
And guilt and shame, those are draining, draining states to be in. So I am not enough can drain you and keep you stuck just because you don't, why bother trying? Because you're not.
Yeah, that's
enough.
the apathy too, right? At those levels.
That's
Fear,
the apathy,
guilt,
and then that comes
shame,
with guilt.
apathy. Yeah.
And then you start to ask yourself, do I deserve to try this? Or, I mean, it really comes down to, do I deserve love? Do I deserve to be a part of the group? Do I deserve to be here? I mean, that's the bottom of it, right? Is when people
Yeah.
start to question whether they even deserve to be.
Sure.
And then I've seen people really have trouble letting go of whatever identity or dream or responsibility they thought they had to the world. Once they realize that there might be a task that they planned on achieving that they don't feel up to, they can really crash, and it can go from a surface thing right down to the deep core,
Right.
because their whole identity just crashed. Yeah.
Sure, of course. Well, that is it too. It's all identity, what you're identifying with, And I think that the reason, I'm going to go really deep here now, but the reason that this lives within all of us, we identify with what they would call the small self. I don't know. I'm sure you're familiar with this sort of stuff. But another term for that actually is the ego. The ego is running around trying to identify with something, whether it's to be a musician or a carpenter or, and when we identify with that smallest part of ourselves, which of course we we do. I mean, I don't think that's an accident, by the way. I don't think that's a malfunction in the human
necessity.
experience.
It's built
Yeah.
into the system. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. There's no choice. On some level, you have to. Yeah.
Exactly. And but I think, and actually, that's a really beautifully nuanced point you just brought up. We're already going all over, but because that's often missed in the spiritual world, right? It's always transcend the ego. It's always the ego's an illusion. You have to realize, wake up from this illusion of the ego. And there's truth to all those things, but at the same time, hey man, it's not a mistake. I mean, look around. Everything is the way it is for a reason, and that's there too for a reason. I mean, so.
It's in all of us, that ego drive, the urge to have an identity, to fill in the blank with I am.
Yes, right.
Whatever. But we all start with I am my interests, I am my talents, I am my position in the world, like in society, I am a member of a group of friends, right? That's where it starts. Right? It starts at the differentiation of you
Sure.
compared to everything else. And when you are differentiating yourself, that is a world of judgment. That is the world of hierarchies.
Sure,
am I the most talented in my friend group at this? Am I as smart as so and so? Right? What is my identity? Where do I fit in? And fitting in is the world of judgment.
Which is why, by the way, I am fill in the blank is always going to result in somewhere, some way, I am not enough. That's
Yes.
just a simple fact. Like once you do one, the next is inevitable. That's the world of duality. And why too?
Yeah.
Because I am this, I am that, fill it in. None of that's going to last. Even if you succeed, even if you're the best of the best, it doesn't last. Every single famous person finds this out, right? We talked about this already once. I don't know if it made the
Right? You can conquer every challenge of the external world, and the sinking feeling that you are not enough is still in your heart.
Right.
Hence all of the depressed people who own the world, right?
Yeah.
Who run the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote on my computer one time as I was trying to inspire myself to work on my thing and to clarify my message, what I wanted to share with people in this way. And I wrote, if you could reach 1 million people right now, what would you say? And I would say, you are not your thoughts and emotions. Most people don't realize that. I am my thoughts. Of course I am my thoughts. Really, whether they are aware of that or not. I am my emotions. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm happy. I am these things. No. You're not these things. These things just come and go, They ebb and flow. They're not who you are, And so inevitably, when you're identifying in that way, inevitably, you're going to stumble upon, I am not enough. Because none of those things can fill in that blank.
Yes. If you're comparing yourself to external forces, anything in the world, somewhere in that equation, you are not enough. I mean, the thought "I am not enough" is so stubborn and so universal.
Yeah. Right.
Because at some level, it is true. Mm-hmm. So people will call me in a coaching session. It's like, I can't do this. I am not enough. And I sometimes I fight back, but sometimes I just say, sure you're not.
Right,
how could you be? Who of us, is enough for the world or enough to fulfill every dream? And how do we, we don't start out enough. We become, maybe if we're lucky, we become enough for some things, but then there's always still something ahead of us that we're not enough for.
Right.
So at some level, if you're looking at yourself to the outside world, it's that, no, on some level, you're not enough. Right? On some level, the world is judgment, right? There is failure. You will do things that will fail, but, right? But then that just leads me to any success is born of failure, right? It's you're here to you're here to fail, and then fail brings success, and then like you said, once you've reached that success, as any famous person will tell you, it's still not enough.
because that's the thing, right? This is why it's useful to tell somebody, and it's funny because I've done the similar thing, like, of course you're not enough, kind of thing. And there's somebody's like, but that's good because it's that it hits them sideways, it gets them looking at it differently, it helps it calm down. Because of course, I am not enough comes with I should be more, like this pressure, this feeling that you should be more, right? Like I think we talked about that before too. Like, that's something that we live in this day and age because there's so much potential that people feel the pressure to do that, right? To be more means a lot these days.
Yeah, you can be anything you want to be, but there's a cost to those lofty goals, is that everyone feels like they need to be shooting for the stars in every single thing they do all the time. And it's such an impossible load to carry for a lifetime that if you get stuck there, then everything you've spent your life building is going to collapse because, first of all, it's not going to make it. If it does make it, it doesn't do what you think it's going to do. It doesn't give you the satisfaction that you think it's going to do. And so if you stay distracted by that world, and it's so big and so shiny that it is so distracting.
Exactly, yes.
And so compelling that it just draws the eye and pulls you in, and it just makes you believe that world of judgment, that world of conditional love, because there is a world of conditional love out there, that's the only game in town.
Yeah. This is the metaphor I was thinking about sharing because I told you I was taking a walk and I was like, I think I might have something I might say. The ego is like a hammer on a job site. I mean, I've been a contractor most of my life, so you're always going to hear these contracting metaphors. But a hammer on a site is incredibly important. It's essential, matter of fact. But it can't be the only tool on the site, right? Because if you need to cut a board, you don't want to do it with a hammer, So the ego is like a hammer. It's a pretty blunt tool in that way too, honestly. Now it has a lot of nuance to it. So in other words, it seems like it puts on the show. It has a lot of fancy little things on this hammer, but in the end, it's a pretty crude tool.
When you say that the hammer isn't the only tool for the job, I do think about coaching sessions, and one of the things that comes up in coaching sessions a lot and relates to something that you've said previously was the quote, man's name is Legion. Right? Meaning there's a lot of selves in us. There's a lot of different personalities that are in us.
Yeah.
And when you say the hammer, might look like a great tool, but it's not the only tool for the job. The I am not enough is one voice inside of us, but it's one of many voices.
Right.
And it is useful, like we said. It can push you into action. It can show you where you need to grow. It can show you the path forward. It can illuminate the way of how you could be more. Right? I am not enough. Right. Here's a way you could be more.
Right.
And so it's a really useful voice. But man, it's not the only voice in there. And I think a lot of people who are stuck in I am not enough is that one voice takes over and is shouting over all of the other voices. And one of the things that I think happens a lot in coaching is that we start looking for the other voices because they're in there. And then we take the voice that's saying I am not enough, and it's so loud, it's trying to tell you something. And one of the ways to allow it to kind of settle back in to the background and not be so upfront is to listen to what it has to say and acknowledge it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And that's why we're trying to make this point that, yes, you're right. You are not enough.
Exactly. Right.
Thank you. Thank you for telling me that. Because there are things I should be aware of. There are limitations to what I'm capable of right now. And the world is a tough place, and there's a lot of judgment in the world, and I'm going to have to live in a world of judgment. So thank you for telling me. However, there's more to this story. What do the other voices have to say? Let's put you in some context. And I think that one thing that coaching does is it gives I am not enough its voice, and then it attempts to so it can settle down. Okay,
that's it.
You've
exactly.
said what you've said what you've had to say, and you're partly right. Good for you.
Right.
Let's hear what else is in there.
There's a beautiful practice, I think it's in the contemplative Christian tradition, that it's called the welcoming prayer. and I can't do it right. It has like 4 steps. It's pretty simple, and it's designed to be that way. And what it is that you welcome it, which immediately turns it on its head, right? But it's actually saying, okay, I'm feeling this I am not enough. The last thing I want to feel is I am not enough. So immediately we typically clench, resist, try to find something else, avoid it, come up with all these other things, right? But if we can simply just say, oh, I'm feeling this feeling of I am not enough. Well, welcome. I am not enough feeling. Welcome in here, and what do you have to say, right? Like I'm not going to shut myself off to this. I'm not going to run from it. Now, this is a heavy practice, but man, the fruits that can be born of it are high. I know from my personal experience, and even me sharing it with other people and them using it. It is a pretty good experience,
this
pretty
is
good
why,
method.
right? So inviting it or allowing it, that's why I say that all of these difficult feelings or fears, treat them as things with good intentions.
Yes.
Think of them as your friend. I mean, as much as, man, I said that to my wife. I'm like, I kind of want to make the point when I talk about this that I am not enough is actually your friend. And she's like, that's a tough pill to swallow. That's a lot.
Yeah.
It sounds a little too easy, but I use that language. Like, this voice in me has a good intention. It is trying to be my friend, as much as it hurts, and therefore let me allow what it has to say. Like, by thinking of it as it's trying to tell me something that maybe I have to allow it to say, tells me that I can invite it in, that I can listen to it. I can make myself a little more vulnerable than I want to.
Which is an act of power.
Yes.
Not weakness, as we talked, right?
Yeah.
But in actually what you're doing to yourself. Now, this is counterintuitive, so most people miss this point, which is why I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to point it out. When you do that, you're actually proving to yourself that you have this ability, which is an act of power.
It's a huge, important distinction. If you try to resist something, what are you telling yourself? If this comes, I can't handle it.
I can't handle it.
Can't handle it.
Exactly my
If
point.
you willingly allow it, what are you telling yourself? I can handle it. It makes all the difference in the world whether you accept whatever's coming on purpose,
Yes.
right? Whether you invite it in or whether it makes its way in, whether it fights its way in. It signals to yourself that you know you're enough to handle it, and that actually changes you not just in your mind,
No,
but your whole physiology takes on that feeling, and you do become more. You might even just become enough, right? To handle that wave. But even if you don't, you bite off what you can chew. But don't undersell yourself. Sometimes you can bite off a little more than you think. You definitely can bite off more than you want to.
That's right? It. And you need to do that, right? It's so much like building a muscle. Like, if you don't push that muscle to the point of where it's hurting a little bit, so to speak, right? Where it's painful, like it's tearing the muscle, you're not building any muscle. It's exactly the same way spiritually. And this is the thing that is important to remember, that you are doing that.
Yeah, and I think it takes going through that grinder a few times of feeling I am not enough, or being shown that maybe you weren't enough to have success here. And then going through that over and over, or having a bunch of success and realizing that that's not enough. And then that's a never-ending story. That's a never-ending path. There's always something new to fail at. there's always some level that you're not up for yet. And then there's a turning point, which is, okay, if that game can't fully be won, is there another game?
That's it. That's
when strategy 2 comes in, and not everyone reaches strategy 2, right?
No.
But that is, if the outside game can't fully be won, or it's always going to send back a failure to me, what else is there? And I think that's what strategy 2 is, to look inward and see, and to see if there's I am enough from an inward perspective.
Right.
Like, is there something just in the spiritual realm? Is there? I think of this like, there's not much more spiritual than having a child, like a spiritual experience, like than having a child.
I was going to bring this up, funny enough. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, when your child is born, is that child enough? And there are two answers. Of course, it's my child. They're enough. They're perfect as they are. They're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. In fact, they are the definition of value and enough. Right? It like hits you on the deepest level. And then there's another instinct you have. This child is not enough. The world is big and I have to prepare them for the world. They are not ready. It's time to train my child because they are not enough to survive this world. And at least one thing as a parent that I realized is that loving your child is holding both of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
I tend to look at how mothers and fathers divide how they approach their children, right? Mostly they're the same, but I do see a pattern when I talk to mothers and fathers. I see mothers tend to lean toward unconditional love. Whatever my child does, you're my baby.
Right.
And I just love you no matter what you do and what you are. And that tends to be the mother instinct tends to lean that direction. And the father instinct tends to be like, you got to do this, this, and this, or you're not going to cut it, kid.
Right.
Right? Because it's a harsh world out there.
It's a different form of love. That's all it is, right? Yeah.
That's exactly the point, that love is unconditional love plus conditional love wrapped. Or it's maybe better said, that ties into what we said a minute ago, it's conditional love wrapped in unconditional love.
Right.
And I think it's the same in just in life in general. I just think that's a metaphor for the truest nature of life. Is of course we're thrown into a conditional world where your actions matter. At least it matters to others, and consequences will be suffered from your abilities and your actions and your choices. But beyond all of that, around all of that, larger than all of that,
Right.
is your unconditional value that you have no choice but to have. Like,
It's
you
so
cannot
beautiful.
escape your unconditional value. Yeah.
But as you pointed out already, this is such a key point. I love where this conversation is going and where it is actually. We are always typically focusing on the conditional part. That's the world
Yes.
of form in the spiritual terms. That's the world of dualism. That's the world of, I am fill in the blank. So we're always focused on that, whether it's I am filling the blank, whether it's I am a musician or I am a carpenter or I am happy or I am sad. These sound so different, but they're actually more similar than most people realize, right? Or, the wrapped up in the senses, right? Like looking for gratification. That's another way to get lost in the world of form, right? And thinking that thing, whatever it is, that chocolate chip cookie is going to give me enough, right? It's going to make me satisfied. I mean, I know we both like chocolate chip cookies, and so
In my world, it's enough. Okay, I don't. Bad example.
sorry, but
I
you
ever
always
want-
want another one. That's the problem. At least I do. I don't know. I can't speak for you, but so it never fills that void of I am not enough. That's all the point is. But that's because we're always looking there. We're always looking at the conditional love part of life. And that all works on that level. Like, if you get the cookie, if you're a good enough boy and you get the cookie, it feels good. And for a moment, you feel the love of the cookie. You know what I mean? But then it goes, and then you're left, and then you're chasing chocolate chip cookies all your life, right? Whether it's the job, whether it's, you understand what I'm trying to say? But meanwhile, we're never looking at the fact that we are just immersed in some form of unconditional love just by one, that we exist, as you really clearly pointed out, especially when you do juxtapose that with the baby. We were all babies at one point, we all still have that intrinsic
You're still
value.
that baby.
We're still that baby.
You're still that baby who no one would deny
Pure,
has preciousness and value.
Precious, yes. And you don't need to do anything to earn that.
It's hard to convey in non-spiritual terms.
It is, actually. This is why I don't even bother trying.
Well, I think that as soon as you start speaking in spiritual terms, that everyone writes it
I
off
know.
as, okay, this is a dogmatic religious point, and maybe that fits with me, maybe it doesn't. But everyone just assumes all the baggage, positive or negative, that comes along with that. But so it is a difficult thing to try to express that you have an intrinsic value just by being, and that you've already done your job.
Yeah.
Like it's already accomplished, and you didn't have to do it.
Right.
It just
Nor
is.
could
It was
you.
done already.
Really.
Nor
Right.
could you. Yeah, that's why I say it's not your fault. Like you couldn't have made yourself. You couldn't have made the decisions about who you are, nor what you face.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're doing your job
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
And trying and failing is part of your job.
Of course, right.
And then becoming more is part of your job. And so you're not supposed to be good enough. I mean, I don't even think that you're even supposed, even in the external ego world, you're not even supposed to be good enough. You're supposed to just be, and part of your nature as a being is to play the hand you're dealt at becoming something, moving towards something.
I think that's part of the when you help somebody see that it's okay that you're not enough. Like, I know it's not a fun feeling, but that's partially because you're buying into the story that you think you should be at this level. At this
I
level,
like that.
you know?
You're buying into the story that you should be.
Yeah.
And the truth is that you're built not to be on purpose.
Exactly. This is, though,
Yes.
by the way, to help you see the true self. That's what I believe. It's the only game in
Yes.
town, David. All the rest just ends up in I'm not enough. You know, it just that's it. You follow it long enough, and it comes back around on itself, and it says, "Wait a minute, this still doesn't work. This still isn't right. This doesn't make me. This doesn't satisfy me. This doesn't fulfill me. This doesn't last." That's typically how they, especially in Hinduism, that would be a big thing. You know, they would talk about Buddhism too. You know, that's why there's suffering. Why? Because nothing lasts in the realm of form. So they're built into it is suffering in a weird way. It sounds so negative, but it's only negative if you get stuck there, right? Like,
If that's the only voice you're hearing.
exactly in our
Right?
terms that we're talking
For the-
today. Yeah,
Yeah, for the I am not enough voice in your head, there's another voice saying, of course you're enough, right? Of course you're not enough. Of course you're enough.
right. So where
Right,
am I
and-
enough? Right? That's the thing.
Yeah, so, and where do you collect the evidence that you are?
Yeah. I talk about this a ton in certain things that, you know, the attributes of this world or this capital S or this dimension to life that we're talking about really are subtler. Subtlety and nuance is the realm of spirituality, if you want my opinion, is the deeper aspects of life. And the first or the greatest indications of those things are what I like to call the three pillars of spirituality, or is silence, space, and stillness. And none of them are shiny, flashy things, right? They all
The
sound like
opposite,
the
yeah,
absence,
the
absence of all those things, right? But they do have their own real presence. This is what I'd like to share before we move on too. If you listen to silence, it does have something to say, which is really interesting. And I encourage everybody who's watching this to take a few minutes to do that, to be quiet and engage with silence and listen. And you'll find, if you can quiet down, because there's all the noise, all the voices are running around, right? But silence does have something to say. It has a presence to it, and it's very powerful. And it helps you get in touch with something more, this big S self, you know, which is incredibly useful. There's almost nothing more useful that you could spend time doing than to engage in this you are enoughness, your unconditional love part of yourself. That's what you're going to find there, funny enough.
That evidence is less shiny, less bright, less often. So sometimes if you don't feel like it's there, you do have to go searching for it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
there to find. It's there
This
to
is the
find.
metaphor of the treasure hunt. If you don't search for it, you're not going to find it. You'll be caught up in the shiny chocolate chip cookie aspect of life, you know? Like, you have to be
I want a
searching
shiny
for it.
chocolate chip cookie. I want to.
I promise I'll ship you one soon. I promise.
I like chocolate chip cookies. I like shiny. I want a shiny chocolate chip cookie.
Wait a minute. I'm finding the
New
answer
goals.
here. I didn't realize
New
it
ego
existed.
goals. Trying to put some
it.
sparkles on that.
This
baby.
is the
All right.
problem, right? I never had a shiny chocolate chip cookie. That's
If I
gonna be
only
the-
had a shiny chocolate chip cookie, I would be enough. Yeah.
Right.
Or I would feel it enough. If
I would
if,
feel enough. Exactly. Exactly. But so I don't even remember what we were saying now. We
ruined
gotta
it.
stop. I gotta get a cookie. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. I was
I have
talking
to
about
satiate
meeting
this.
the big S self and evidence, finding the evidence, and you talked about the treasure hunt.
The treasure. Well, this is the point of it, though, and that's why the metaphor works well. It really does. One, you got to start hunting for it, and then you got to dig, because it's kind of buried. You know, like you're not going to find it on the surface. That's why I think the metaphor is actually, it's actually quite good. You know, it's quite accurate in a weird way.
It's one thing to say, go there, you'll find it.
Yeah,
But there's a reason why people don't go there.
it's true.
And so everybody knows somebody who's always super busy. Right? Busy, busy, busy doing. Right? There's a bumper sticker that I laughed at once that said Jesus is coming really big, right? That you see like a religious Jesus is coming, but then under it said look busy. Jesus is coming. Look busy. But I think that the people who are driven to always be super busy in the world is because Jesus is coming, meaning judgment is coming.
Yeah.
Meaning that if they stop being busy, then that brings the moment of judgment. And so sitting in that quiet space looking for the big S self means that the wave of judgment is going to come over you. And that is not a fun place to be. And so people avoid it with every ability they have. That's why they stay busy. That do more. You know, he not busy being born is busy dying. Celebrate doing adventure. You know, live your life to its fullest. We'll sleep when we're dead. All that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Because if they stop, then comes the existential dread, right?
Yeah.
It's all for nothing. All of my efforts are just gonna fail, right? Because if what they really know is the ego world, and they stop trying to achieve something in the ego world, then they see the end of the capacity of the ego world, and
Which
they
is
see
all
that
they've
it's
known.
all for nothing.
It's all
Yes.
they've known at this point. Most
But
of
their
us.
identity is tied to the ego world. So as soon as
Yeah.
they see that the ego world is a never-ending, not enough land of nothingness, then they have to see that their own identity is that nothingness. They come crumbling down,
Right.
and then that voice, I am not enough, and all the other voices of doubt get super loud, and that place is an awful place to be. So why is meditation hard? Because it's damn uncomfortable. Because it hurts. Because the voices in your head are way louder than you think they are.
Yeah, and you don't even notice it until you take time to listen.
Yes.
You know,
But-
and then you don't wanna. You know, you don't want to listen.
But
to
then
all
you
that
don't
noise.
want to. And that's what I was trying to say earlier, and maybe it's a better way to say it, is that so there's all those voices telling you you're not enough, but that you have to give voice to them, right? So yes, you are not enough. Yes, everything will fall apart. Yes, you'll never get there. But if someone's willing, and you kind of I see it as kind of walking somebody through that place where that wave comes over them of realizing
yeah.
that's the finite universe. But then if you stay long enough, if you go on the treasure hunt and go through all
That's
of the hardness, then once the wave passes, the wave is past, and on the other side of the wave is where you start to hear that voice that you are enough. In fact, look, you're still here. You have to face that overwhelming wave of judgment of the look busy, Jesus is coming.
Right. That's great, by the way. I love that. Yeah, you know, and this is, again, like you've already pointed out, but this is the treasure hunt, the usefulness of it. You wouldn't do it unless you thought there was some treasure there. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't sit through that dread. That's why I try to stress, like, there is. It's not going to be all fun and games. You got to work through some serious stuff, but it's worth it, right? Yeah. That's the point, I think, of why it's useful. It shows you a few things, like in other words, there is something of value. It's going to take some digging. It's going to take some work. You know what I mean? You got to get up and start looking for it, because you're not going to find it just wandering around, getting, attracted by every shiny thing. It's not a shiny thing, funny enough, right? So I think this is why it's very hard for us as human beings to even see the value sometimes. Again, too, because quite often it isn't immediate. Like, you eat that chocolate chip cookie, it's immediate gratification, right? That's the beauty of it. That's part of what we love about it,
Whatever gets you through the night is the song, right? Whatever gets you through the night.
Exactly. But it never really does. It doesn't get you through the night of your life in a weird way, because you're just chasing. You're always running. That's how I, and I know, because that was my experience.
I want to stop on that metaphor for a minute, because you just hit on something that anyway, just, I quoted the John Lennon song, whatever gets you through the night, and most people do that, but it doesn't get you through the night of your life. There's a short arc of the story, there's the night, and then there's your life.
Yeah.
Right? And it might, the chocolate chip cookie or the endorphins rush or whatever might get you through the night, or the staying busy, feeling like you're, like you're doing your job, might get you through the night, but it's not going to get you through your life.
Right.
It's not going to get you much further than where you are today.
What
It's
was that
certainly
study?
not going to prepare you. It's not going to prepare you to encapsulate the "I am not enough" feeling. It's certainly not going to do that.
It's not designed to do that. It's designed to help you realize that there's something, like, you got to start looking somewhere else. That's what I believe. And it only does that by saying, this is not enough. That's the inevitable thing, right? This is not enough. So then all of a sudden you start to think, well, is there something that is enough? We've already said this, and that once you find the enough, which I do believe there is such a thing, and it doesn't mean what most people think. This isn't some, finish line where they have the hammock strung up for you and you just lay there on the beach for the rest of your life eating shiny chocolate chip cookies, right?
Feeling really good about yourself. Yeah.
Right, because you've arrived. It's not that. But there is an enoughness where you can choose to do something. You're not driven to do it. That's a big difference right there. I don't know if you can feel that, right?
You don't need to do it to validate your existence.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
To fill this void. You do it because
pre-validated.
You're pre-validated, exactly.
Yeah, now go do something.
But I want to finish.
Yeah.
I want to finish the thought really quick, just to make sure that it's clear what I'm trying to say, as far as the fact that now that you've discovered the not enoughness, though, and then you find the enoughness in this new way that I'm trying to describe, which is not some final goal, you now can carry both worlds in a way you never would be able to before.
It's that meeting your big S self makes everything else on the ground okay. It makes you okay. It makes your failures okay. It makes the limitations of the world okay.
Yes, exactly. Win, lose. Right, exactly.
You are exactly what you are supposed to be today. And maybe you're not yet exactly what you're supposed to be tomorrow.
You are exactly what you're meant to be today. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're not right now exactly what you're meant to be tomorrow. But another thing I want to point out, because that's beautiful and perfect and really important to understand, but also, which is challenging sometimes for some people, your past, whatever you were, is exactly what you were meant to be. And that can be challenging sometimes for us, right? And that means what's happened, the whole kit and caboodle, right? To look back and be able to accept that and to look and say, that's exactly what it was meant to be, is challenging sometimes. But I think it's an important element, especially in self-awareness and in personal growth even, right? To be able to see that and say, it doesn't mean that's what you wanted. It doesn't mean it was right. This isn't, because it could be a terrible thing that happened, or you know what I'm trying to say. But the fact that you can look there and just say, it's because it's what it was. You know what I mean? So I have to accept that and take that and take from that what I can today. right? And then move on to tomorrow, you know. I have to do this too. So the not enoughness, you made me think of this. It's a quote that you're going to love because it's from our favorite person, Leonard Cohen. But, right, so the facing the not enoughness puts cracks in our ego, but the cracks are how the light get in.
Yeah,
right?
There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Exactly. That's the quote accurately said.
I am not enough is the crack through which the light comes in.
Right. And the only game in town is to see that light. That would be what is to find that light of your unconditional self.
It's not a flaw. It's not a flaw in the system. I am not enough is not a flaw. It's in you by design. It's in you to make you more in the world and to make you see that there's more than the world.
Ooh, perfectly said. I love when you do that.
Well, that's why the Leonard Cohen quote is great. There's a crack in everything, including you, and that's how the light gets in.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think that brings us at least to our stopping point for today on our topic of you are not enough.
Right, because it's never enough for us. We could just keep talking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for us, it's never enough.
It's never enough. I love that Cure song. Yeah.
But just in summary on this topic, that voice will always be with you. And it's with everybody. You are not alone. And
that's right.
It is there for a reason. It is there because there are many practical ways where you're not enough, or at least not enough yet.
Right.
But so it's true, but it's also not true. So of course you are not enough, but of course you are enough. And there is a part of you that is enough. And you couldn't remove that part of you if you tried. It's not up to you. You didn't create it. You cannot take it away. And that part of you is enough. And that part of you that is enough can contain and hold and carry the part of you that is not.
That's it. Beautifully said, David.
Right? Because it's going to join the conversation. There's no way around it. It's going to join the conversation. So you have to learn to speak with it. And you have to learn how to have a better conversation with I am not enough.
Yeah. And I think that happens when you understand it. So hopefully we've helped that a little bit today. Understand it, the whole conversation that is going on about I am not enough. I think it's important that it's going to happen. It's going to be there. It just can't dominate your conversation, right? Yes. Whether it's I'm not enough that keeps you low, or I'm not enough I got to achieve and do. That's another form of dominating, that conversation dominating. So I think it was a beautiful wrap up, David. Thank you for that.
Okay. So please, we always tell people, first of all, if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're following, if you're watching it or listening to it via podcast, please help us just by liking, subscribing, setting your notifications, all the stuff that people ask you to do, because you are injecting energy into this conversation. You are helping it reach people. You're helping us do what we want to do, and we really are sincerely doing our best to bring you something of meaning and of value.
Right.
And we're not just here, to stroke our own, to become enough in the world of egos. We really are trying to do something here. All right. So next time, everyone is where they want to be, including you. Prove us wrong.
Prove us wrong. Right. Well, actually, want to be with us. That's what I hope you will do. So, excellent, David. I can't wait. That's going to be an interesting conversation.
Until then.
Until then.